Tim, how are you? Thanks for having me, and thanks for the listeners listening in, and a big shout out to the Tiger stockbroking community who I believe are also listening in. For those that don't know Estrella, we've been around since 2017, and I've been running the business for the last few years trying to hunt down some nickel. And over the course of the journey, we've always had in the back of our mind that obviously we want to stand up on our own 2 feet, and going to transitioning into nickel production is a strategy that we are now looking at some of the assets that we do have in the asset pool. The picture on the front cover of the presentation is a picture of the 5A nickel pit, which we're looking to undertake a full DFS and transition the company rapidly into nickel production. I'm going to just turn the slide, please. Standard disclaimer, you can view that onto the ASX platform. We released this presentation in the last few days, so that can be accessed. Our board and management team, some will know, we've been around for a while. I've been in the nickel game for the last 20 years. Our team's been together for the last few years, working away at trying to build quite a significant nickel business. We've managed to secure Steve Warriner, who is an expert in nickel sulphide geology and exploration. He's made numerous discoveries in his time, and he's joined the company as well, and he's been a great asset of the business as we're moving forward with our nickel exploration and development activities. Next slide, please. So Estrella at a glance, we haven't really got far from my hometown of Kalgoorlie. We have the Carboid Nickel Sulphide project. We own 100%, 80 kilometres northeast of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, where we made a discovery in October 2020, and we've been drilling heavily out there and more aggressively since that time. We have 2 diamond rigs out there at the moment. Our discovery at T5 is certainly proving itself over the journey, and there's still a lot of work to be done there. But the real crux of this presentation will be the Spargoville Nickel Sulphide project, or nickel rights we acquired back in 2017 that sit to the southwest of the town of Kambalda, which is obviously the central nickel producing town of Western Australia, and is well known. So we're only 20 kilometres from that central processing facility at Kambalda, and we're obviously seeking to rapidly bring Estrella forward into production in the backdrop of the current environment. If we were asked whether Estrella was cheap today, I think we'd be fairly easily poised to say yes. I think we are, with the assets that the company holds and what we've been doing over the past 18 months. I think current pricing of around $26 million, the company represents value in the backdrop of the nickel market. If we just turn the slide, please. So it really is, it's economics 101, it's supply and demand. We've seen a 65% increase in the nickel price in the past 6 months. There's been a severe squeeze on the LME, which has heightened, obviously, nickel prices, or we've seen historic high nickel prices. Stockpiles are remaining very, very low, and there's obviously a short amount of nickel sitting in LME warehouses for supply. So it's really 101 economics. Obviously, the EV and battery thematic is driving a lot of that demand, and that's only increasing as we see going out right through to in the later years. There's going to be a severe shortage of nickel, and we've placed ourselves with some great assets and looking to discover more nickel sulphide so we can supply into that demand. If we can just turn the slide, please. So with a major appreciation in the nickel price, we think it is the right time to deploy capital and to look at developing assets we bought in 2017 from WA Nickel. We haven't done a lot with the assets since we acquired it. We did drill some holes in 2018, got some spectacular results, but Carboid really took our attention because we are looking for something fairly significant out there. But the Spargoville nickel rights consist of 4 nickel deposits, the 1A, the 5A, 5B and the 5D, or the Andrews deposits, which were discovered in the 70s and developed through the nickel boom of that period. And the 5A nickel pit was actually mined in the latter part of the 1990s. We believe that these assets now, in the backdrop of the current nickel environment, would lead us to potentially get cash flow going from these assets again in light of what's actually occurring in the district. We've seen obviously processing facilities or third-party tolling facilities reopen in the backdrop of the nickel environment. We've seen a number of nickel mines reopen and be developed. So we're right in that neighbourhood, and we think that the 4 assets that we do have there, and starting with 5A, can be developed in that backdrop. So the DFS study that we're currently doing to determine how we go about mining this particular first deposit, the 5A, is really where we're focusing some attention. And it is really all about location, location, location. We were fortunate enough to pick up these assets at a time when nickel prices were much lower and they were out of favour, but you can't go too far wrong being only an hour's drive out of Kambalda and only 20 kilometres from Nickel Central at Kambalda. Slide change, please. So the 5A nickel deposit is our priority. It's a small development. It's a stepping stone to bigger things for us. 5A is the least capital intensive mine that of the 4 mines that Estrella own at Kambalda or Spargoville, and it's the most advanced of those projects. The mineralisation at 5A consists of oxide and transitional material, and then fresh sulphides, which we are currently drilling at the moment to determine where that transitional to fresh zone exists, so that we can then determine obviously the ore reserve and how we're going to go about in treating that material at 5A. Slide change, please. So as it stands today, that drilling has commenced for the definitive feasibility for 5A. We've got about 17 holes. In fact, we've increased that now to probably more likely 18 to 20 holes. The drilling's going very well. We've got about 3 weeks from today to complete that program. The diamond drill rig is performing exceptionally well. And so we've been obviously receiving those cores. We have been transporting the cores to our core logging facilities at Carboyd, which we've had set up for the past year and a half with our exploration works at Carboyd. So we've been logging and cutting the Spargoville cores as they've been produced, and they've been refrigerated, ready for met testing, which will get underway shortly. And the aim of that is to obviously work out the parameters of which of the material will float, how much recovery we will get, how it will perform in certain environments or certain processing facilities. And then obviously we can then target how we approach the mining and transportation and processing of that ore. We're targeted to complete this DFS over the course of the next 3 months. It's not a huge project. It's not going to consume hours and hours and hours of professionals' time, but we will have it completed fairly quickly. We've got some good personnel working on that, and we are targeting on a positive DFS production in 2023. And that might surprise a few people that Australia is moving so quickly into production, but it's the case of the project is fairly advanced. It's fairly straightforward. It's a simple pit cutback. It's on granted mining leases. It fits within the SM small mining project class. So it's only a 10 hectare surface, or less than 10 hectare surface area. So it fits into a new category of mine development that have been streamlined by DMERS. So it's 45 days from approval once we submit our mine planning. Slide change, please. So really 5A is a stepping stone into other near-term potential assets that Estrella has in the portfolio, and they're larger assets. 5B and the Andrews deposit both have a higher capital intensity to obtain those nickel resources and produce cash flow. But certainly 5A, we believe, will generate enough cash flow for us to then step into these deposits in the backdrop of a very strong nickel price environment. And we believe that these particular assets in the portfolio will be developed by Estrella in a stepped way. We see that the assets at Spargoville in the portfolio, in the backdrop that we have, just simply need to be progressed and developed. But obviously, we first need to stand before we run. Slide change, please. So you'll see in those graphics that 5B deposit already has a significant decline development. The 5B is a shaft development down to 250 metres, and then the 1A deposit was developed on a number of levels. So quite large assets, have nickel resources with them, and we'll look to develop those. Of particular note with these assets, that they do not have onerous royalties attached to them from prior sales and purchases, and thus the hurdle to positive cash flow is much lower than some of the surrounding mines and deposits. Next slide, please. So that's us in a nutshell at Spargoville. We're already underway with the diamond drilling and the metallurgical confirmation work. We're due to commence those pit optimisation works and have that final resource model done in the course of the next couple of months. And subject to positive DFS, we look to be commencing mining and producing cash flow for the business in the first quarter of 2023. Thanks, Tim. That's it from me. There may be some questions I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, quite a few questions actually. So was the kind of strategic shift to bringing Spargoville rather into production about generating some cash flow?
Look, it has been. We purchased the asset because the opportunity was there. The assets were I guess they're cheap. They were unloved at the time in 2017. The strategy for us has always been to discover a major ore body at Carboid Rocks, and we continue to aggressively explore Carboid, and it remains our flagship project. We've got 2 rigs out there at the moment going 24/7. The T5 discovery is expanding. We put out a release the other day that's very positive. We're seeing that the mineralisation is strengthening at depth, and that our geological model at T5 and Carboid is intact. And I guess there's an enormous area of Carboid and the basal contact where we know the nickel mineralisation exists that is still to be tested. But in the environment that we're sitting in, with the backdrop of the nickel price environment, it would be not right for us to sit back and just not take advantage of this strength in the nickel price. So jointly bringing that development through on Spargoville is just, we have to do it. It makes perfect sense for us to do it now.
And that makes perfect sense. What are the sort of hurdles in your way before you bring Spargoville into production?
Yeah, so we don't see any showstoppers at Spargoville. They're granted mining leases. We do have to complete the necessary mine plans, so right through from the submission of the mine planning, so your environmental planning, and you're right through to mine closure. So those documents need to be submitted to DMIRS, but it has been streamlined over the last couple of years. So since I think there was new guidelines put out in 2020, and because we fall under the SMP, the small mining project class, we only have to submit all of those plans appropriately and in detail, and then there's a 45-day period, but DMIRS will review that, and then hopefully there's no errors in our planning, and 45 days we should have approvals, and then we should be able to commence, and subject to a positive DFS of course, and locking in some processing pathways for us. We see absolutely no showstoppers to get 5A off the ground and producing cash flow for the company.
And there's quite a few questions coming through here around carboid and T5, and where do they sit now in terms of going? Where do they sit now in regards to Spargoville being first?
Yeah, look, we'll still aggressively explore carboid. It is our flagship. We're doing it in conjunction, or we're developing Spargoville in conjunction, which will aid us in only aggressively exploring the rest of the asset pool. We only see 5A as a stepping stone to greater things. It'll allow, I guess, the cash flow for us to aggressively explore, but to also develop the other Spargoville assets. So we haven't lost any faith at all in carboid. We have had drill rigs out there consistently since October 2020. We're seeing not just smoke, we're seeing fire, we're seeing massive sulphides up to 4% nickel. It's sitting within the geological models that exist worldwide. 99% of the world's nickel sits on basal contacts. We've drilled nickel on the basal contacts. So we'll continue to search for the source of the nickel copper that presents itself at carboid, and has presented itself, looking for an economic development there. But Spargoville represents a rapid turn in the current backdrop to get the company to production and cash flow, and not come back to the market with our hands out trying to raise more capital. And obviously in the backdrop of the current environment, the market volatility is certainly over the last few months has shown that potentially is a difficult environment to be. So having cash flow and having a business that can generate cash flow to develop the assets further is something that we want to pursue, and pursue it with some vigour.
Thanks, Chris. That makes perfect sense. That's all we have time for. There's a number of questions online. If you have time to answer those, it'd be appreciated. Otherwise, I'll send them to you over the weekend. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me. Thanks for those listening in. Thanks very much.